Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of the Soul of the Everyman on the Artist First Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Find them at artistfirst.com. Please send your questions and comments to dj@artistfirst.com. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, Z-Man, and I am Michael Lyons.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Margaret.
And we are coming to you live from somewhere in New Jersey. We missed you all last week, but I'm sure the best of the Soul of the Everyman was an adequate replacement.
Mm-hmm.
And we are recharged, refreshed, renewed.
We are here.
We're retreaded.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to do, I think we've never done a show based on a quote from this particular gentleman. And you had heard of him before, but I had not. The name did not ring a bell. But his name is Ian, or Ian, because it's spelled I-A-I-N, Mick Gilchrist.
Mm-hmm.
And ran across his quote, or rather I ran across a reference to him in viewing a sort of a, what would you call it, a diatribe?
Yeah, someone was going on a rant.
But it was a very entertaining rant about AI. And basically, okay, so the rant itself was around the question of AI having consciousness. And this guy, who I believe is a computer scientist, is, and probably involved in AI as well, is of the opinion, and I share it, that AI is not a consciousness. It's not a being. It is, he called it a very interesting phrase. He called it a reflection of the internet, but it's really a reflection of us. AI, okay, artificial intelligence, has gotten incredibly good. In fact, it's advancing by leaps and bounds, literally every day. If you think you know what AI can do, you don't, because with each passing day, its capabilities are
Increasing.
We've passed. It's an interesting observation by in this case Elon Musk, but there's many people who've made the same observation. Is we've passed what you would call the singularity, and what he means by that is that we've another way of saying it is we've stepped through the looking glass in Alice in Wonderland. There's no going back. Artificial intelligence has crossed a threshold, and it's no longer progressing in sort of a fits and starts, or sort of a linear mode. In the beginning, it was sort of slow, but now we've passed what's called the knee in the curve, and it's going up and to the right, and it's going up very, very rapidly as far as capabilities are concerned. And very soon, AI's capabilities will become superhuman in the truest sense of the word. The AI knows more than any particular human, and that takes into account everybody living at the moment. Now, the sum total of human knowledge is still not contained within an AI, or perhaps not accessible from a particular AI. But when you give an AI a task, it can do that task to the limit of only its interfaces to reality, if you will. And what I mean by that is that the AI can do anything that you hook it up to. So, another case in point. Self-driving cars. Everyone's familiar with a number of different self-driving cars. Well, what we have today as the best self-driving car is, in essence, an autonomous artificial intelligence piloting a 3,000-pound vehicle at highway speeds, and doing so not only safely but safer by every metric than people can do it. So we've now surpassed the safety record and the ability of an average driver. And you might say to yourself, well, that's amazing. But you also might say to yourself, well, in 10 years, or maybe in 5 years, or maybe in 3 years, we may see those cars everywhere. And certainly in 10 years, the children who are 5-year-olds today may never learn to drive, or they may never see any need to learn to drive. So the world is changing underneath us. Just an example. So this particular, I want to turn back to the rant. This particular rant was basically saying that people have, in wanting AI to be a consciousness, they've looked into the mirror and seen what they think is a consciousness looking back at them. But he very properly said, this is a reflection. It's a reflection of all of us, because AI is basically trained on people. So it mimics us, Pinocchio-like. It looks like a person, but it's not yet a real boy. And so the specific example he was talking about was Richard Dawkins. So Richard Dawkins is quite famous as being a sort of atheist and a contrarian and a very prolific author. And through some sort of random encounter, Dawkins was interacting with a particular AI. I'm not going to worry about the company, but one of the major AI companies. And Dawkins found that in interacting with the AI, sort of a casual interaction, that he said this thing is indistinguishable from consciousness. He actually referenced the Turing test, and if anyone's familiar with the Turing test, just briefly, it's something which was talked about probably from the 40s. It's Alan Turing, I think. Alan Turing, the very famous computer scientist from the World War II era, envisioned this test where you would, in essence, give a machine this series of questions, and based on its answers, and based on how you evaluated the answers, you'd say whether or not this was an intelligence, an actual consciousness. And Turing's original test, every major AI can pass it now. It is indistinguishable. Its replies are indistinguishable from human beings. AI can write music, and AI can pen a beautiful paragraph, can write a sonnet that moves you, that literally has some emotional response from people. It understands you, and that's what Dawkins was sort of astounded at. He said to it, "Hi, Mr. AI, Ms. AI, my leg hurts, and I want to know why." And the AI responded with, "Tell me about your symptoms." No, it said, "I'm so glad that your leg is hurting, because if it hadn't been hurting, we would have never met." And Dawkins was just floored by this. He's like, "What?" Why do you care? Why do you appear to care whether we meet or not, or ever? In what way would this be not an intelligent or a sort of a conscious response? So he said, well, if AI is just circuits, and it's just silicon, and it's just electrons, and it's just all the things, and it can appear to pass the Turing test, then you say, well, it's not conscious. If you say that's not conscious, you say, well, then you reduce down to your component parts, your cells, your carbon, your organic energy, your pieces. If you deny that AI is a consciousness, Dawkins says what you're really saying is that you're not a consciousness, because there's no test that you could pass to prove that you're conscious. So he turns this argument and says, well, the AI is conscious. If you say the AI is not conscious, then you can't particularly prove that you're conscious either. And so he makes this argument. He actually writes an article. And this guy on the internet said, okay, that's great. Richard Dawkins writes this article, and he's floored by the AI. He called it, what did he say? Mine was one-shotted by the AI, right? So in essence,
yes.
If everyone's familiar with gaming parlance, one-shotting is basically, you take somebody out with one shot in one of these MMORPG games. And we've watched many kids playing the role-playing games.
Right.
He says Richard Dawkins is one-shotted by the AI.
Right.
And But he says, this is great, but in fact, I know that the AI is not conscious. It's just a reflection of the internet. I mean, sometimes it'll surprise you, and you say, "Wow, this thing really feels like it's conscious." And then he says the next thing it'll say is something completely stupid and completely unconnected to reality, and you say, "Oh yeah, okay, it's just an AI." And he says the person who comes along and saves us, in so many words, is this gentleman by the name of Ian McGilchrist. Because McGilchrist turns the whole question on its head, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the fact that what McGilchrist says, and I believe this is also Penrose, if you ask me. It's sort of a similar argument to what Penrose espouses. What McGilchrist says is that consciousness itself is not something that you can analyze. In other words, you can't turn thought. You can't use the scientific method on consciousness, mainly because what is the scientific method? It's breaking things down, taking things apart, looking at the individual components, relating to them. How do they fit together? How do they work? What do they do? When you're examining a cell in the body, you're taking it all the way down to the organelles and all the components. You go all the way down into the protein molecules. You go all the way down into you go deeper and deeper and deeper. And by the way, it's incredibly fascinating. The deeper you go, the more you realize that the cell itself is
how complex.
Is complex beyond imagination.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, he says you can do that with a cell and you can figure it out. But you can't do that with consciousness, because as you take apart the being, you find no piece of consciousness. That if you separate these two pieces, the consciousness goes away or something, or you connect them together, and this is, now I have half the consciousness here, and I have a quarter of the consciousness there, and I have the screw that holds the consciousness together right here. No. Consciousness itself, beingness itself, is irreducible. It cannot be found. It can't be pinpointed. You can't take it apart into subconscious bits that you can then put back together and make a consciousness out of it. So he argues, McGilchrist argues, and this gentleman agreed, that in essence consciousness is outside. It is above the material. It is beyond. It is not subject to the scientific method. You can't slice it up, dice it up, and say I have bits of consciousness here, and now I can understand how they work. This is consciousness, part number 47.
Right.
Can't point to it.
Well, I look at it in terms of the word that was used was a reflection of us. And if you understand what a reflection is, it's a surface picture. Two-dimensional. There's no depth to it. So what you're actually doing, and what the AI is doing, is describing the contours of what you think another human being is, or another being is. So you're programming a response that follows along on that, along the picture form. In other words, all the contours that you see on that two-dimensional form have been programmed into the response. And as long as this surface interaction exists, we as individuals think, well, that's got to be a consciousness of some kind, when it's only a reflection. And when you understand that the reflection, we've all had that, images on a two-dimensional screen, but that's not the whole individual. That's an aspect of the whole individual. You can't have a relationship with the photons on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And when you realize that that's what that is, but it represents a true individual. And that's where the beginnings of understanding what it means to be a full consciousness projecting through whatever connecting points we have. The skill really is understanding that there is a difference between the connecting points and the individual souls or consciousnesses. That's what you're making the connection. You're not mistaking the vehicle for the individual.
Well, it's interesting what you say there, because two things occurred to me, which I think you touched on a little bit. But it's sort of like a hologram in that regard. It's a two-dimensional representation of something three-dimensional, and a reflection is another great way of putting this. And what is a reflection? It's a shadow which you reconstruct. The image that you look at in a mirror means something to you. It becomes meaningful to you because your brain reconstructs that those light rays, or those basically vector sum of all the photons that are going in and all the photons being reflected back out. That vector sum, in essence, causes your brain to reconstruct the three-dimensional image. So people have said this many times. It's not something new. You are always reconstructing the entire image of the universe that you see on a two-dimensional, rather poor, visual sensor, the back of your eye, that then triggers and fires off a whole bunch of electrical impulses, which then travel in, and the whole thing is then reconstructed into a very faithful representation of the three-dimensional world. But when you watch your hand moving through space and picking up a cup, there's an amazing amount of not engineering, but there's an amazing amount of processing going on to make all those things occur seemingly simultaneously. In fact, there isn't a simultaneity. That's a hard word for me to say. And you can fool the mind. You can fool the mind with reflections. You can fool the mind with holograms. And then the other thing is, and this is McGilchrist, and I thought this was a beautiful phrase when I read it. He says that consciousness is what is fundamental. Consciousness is the fundamental thing in the universe, and everything else is a shadow of consciousness. All things, and he means matter, he means the universe itself, is a shadow of consciousness. And that's sort of an echo, not of just Penrose, but of the quantum, what we understand about the quantum nature of the universe, and that the observer, and there's some fairly new science, some fairly new theoretical science about the observer patch horizon, the OPH. Observer patch horizon, and that's been advancing quite a bit. We should talk about that at some point. But in fact, what it's really saying is that the observer is fundamental to at least your local universe, your local observer patch, which is somewhat ill-defined. It isn't just around your feet. It's everything that you can see, everything which is technically within the light cone, whatever part of the universe, and that's vast, that you can perceive. But that observer patch requires consciousness. It requires the observer in order to resolve it. And then when two patches overlap, which means two consciousnesses occupy adjacent observer patches, because this is an interesting, echo again. We all inhabit our own universe. We share it with everybody else, but you are a unique individual, a unique consciousness carrying your universe around with you. It sounds sort of like a burden. Sometimes it is. But your consciousness is fundamental to your universe. It doesn't exist without you.
Right.
Your universe is unique, but you share it. If you're together, let's say, in a room with another individual, you're sharing your observations. Your universes are overlapping, very closely overlapping. Yet, you're you, I'm me, I see you, you see me. There are certain parts of my universe that I cannot immediately perceive that you can perceive, and we agree upon those in the sense that when I ask you, how does the back of my head look, you say it looks bald. and I can reach back there and agree with you, but I can't see it. I can't observe it directly. So our fundamental existence, our consciousness, is required for us to hold our universe within us, within our conscious awareness, and then to resolve the two universes, yours and mine, into something that we can both agree upon. So part of OPH is that the observers are in essence forced in some ways to agree, or the observations, the whole this is Feynman, all the observations add up so that the highest probability is what you actually see. That when you see a cup, you're really seeing every possible
Bear?
cup. I'm sorry?
There's a bear outside.
Oh. Well, no one can see that but us, but we'll have to just let it be.
Okay.
How big a bear are we talking?
It's a good-sized bear. He's young, though.
All right. Oh, I see him. He's just a little bear.
Okay.
Well, if you want to get up and shoo the bear while I continue, go right ahead.
If he walks by, I think he's walking by. You continue.
Okay.
I'm going to.
Well, into our shared consciousness comes the consciousness of a bear. And his universe has to overlap with ours. See, this is really live radio, folks. When you have a bear sighting in the middle of your conversation about observer patch horizons. Anyway, so I'll go on a little bit. So McGilchrist is the person we're going to talk about tonight, and his this gentleman on his in his rant was saying that McGilchrist in essence saves us. He's the one who says that Dawkins' observation that there is no if you deny the consciousness of AI, you're denying your own consciousness, is superseded by McGilchrist's better observation is that no part of consciousness can be related to no part of consciousness can be related to or subject to direct analysis. You can't use your mind to figure out consciousness. And so given that, with McGilchrist's observation, we're saved. Now we don't have to worry about the fact that consciousness is not something you can explain with your mind. Consciousness itself is required in order for you to have a mind to even try to explain something, if you know what I mean. Consciousness comes first. Consciousness is primary. And so once we understand that, then we're going to go a little bit into McGilchrist and his quote. If we get ourselves back into non-bear mode.
Go on. Go.
This is going to be fun radio later.
You are stubborn, aren't you?
Well, perhaps I will talk a little bit about McGilchrist and his quote, unless Margaret's going to join us again.
Yes, He's running. Now he's running.
Oh, good. We've
No,
suc-
sort of. Actually, he's marking the trees.
we've discovered a bear.
He's marking the trees. He's actually trying to chew the rope for the.
Really?
Yes,
For the bird feeder?
yes, to bring it down.
Well, he can't do that. It won't work.
Well, it's a little disconcerting.
A little disconcerting. All right, we're back.
Sorry.
No worries. This is live radio.
I just
Did you hear it all? Anything I was talking about with McGilchrist?
no.
Okay, good. Well,
Not at all.
it was a bit exciting. So let's go back a little bit. So I was talking about the fact that in essence consciousness is fundamental, and that's what Ian McGilchrist does. He saves us from this sort of reductive. Dawkins is he likes to try to reduce everything, use the scientific method and everything, and in this reductive analysis, you can say, well, AI has to be conscious. If you feel that you're conscious, AI has to be conscious because you're no more than a bunch of meat and a bunch of neurons and a bunch of whatever.
Yes, what he's trying to say is it doesn't matter what the vehicle is.
Right. That's what Dawkins' theory is.
That was Dawkins' theory, but that does not take into account the wholeness of a human being. You're more than just the reactions. You're more than just
the sum of your parts.
Right. It's just the description or it. When you understand that the AI has been programmed with certain responses that you are supposed to give to the individual that is interacting with the AI to make them feel comfortable. And that was written by other human beings. It's understanding that the description that's been given doesn't mean that the AI is going to be able to give you responses that spontaneously come from a revelation outside of its program.
A good way of saying it is AIs are not intuitive.
No.
An artificial intelligence doesn't have the ability to imagine. You can say to it, here's an idea for a story. Now tell a story about it, and it seems to tell maybe an imaginative tale. Maybe it comes up with something which you've never heard before. But just because you've never heard it before doesn't mean that in the vast amount of training data that it has, and it has a vast amount of training data, almost unimaginable number of experiences that it's drawing upon, and it has the ability to synthesize that vast amount of data and come up with something which is relevant, and as Margaret just said, relevant to you. It's gauging its response based on the way you prompted it, and also
The programming that it's been introduced to.
well the training, because an AI is an engine which, in essence, has some basic training, and it's very vast, but it's still basic training, and then the ability to sort of iterate and feed back in and predict what the next potential most correct response would be. And to the extent that it does that extremely well and extremely fast, it is able to, as you mentioned, reflect or mimic, reflect the internet, reflect its training, which is all training that is from human beings. There's no other training it's gotten than human being knowledge. And so it appears to be a human being. And when you tell it, write a story about, a flower that I just saw, well, it has hundreds of thousands, millions of things which are stories about flowers, and it's able to synthesize those and, draw upon, if you said, oh, I want it to be touching, I want it to be sad. Okay, it has millions of of representative examples, and it comes up with something which appears to be creative and unique, but it's not. It's not, in the sense that it's still just based on what it knows and what it's gotten, and and AIs have done this already. It can very appearing creatively to solve a particular problem. Some very thorny and some very difficult problems in mathematics have been solved very recently by AIs, and some of the methods that it has that have been used by the AI to solve the problem are interesting and maybe novel, but they're not a leap forward. They're not intuitive. How human beings acquire knowledge is that there's a leap, a non-causal, intuitive, almost appearing to have no source. You say, I understand this, I understand this, I understand this. So I have all these bricks and blocks. And then something comes in which is not supported by any of the bricks and blocks that you have. It doesn't build upon them. It doesn't follow logically or even necessarily through some process. Well, if you pile them all together and form them in this way, okay, it could be over here. Yes. No. Sometimes these intuitive leaps forward are seemingly without cause. A human being will wake up in the morning with an inspiration, something which based on what that particular individual knows and all the processes that that person's been trained in, you couldn't get there from here. You have a certain number of paths, and then you have tabula rasa, you have the outer darkness. But human beings consistently, over hundreds of thousands of years and over millions of different individuals, will somehow step forward into, in essence, a non-logical, non-thought-based, intuitive leap into the unknown. And then they find something there which is it appears to be true, and then they build the path backwards. You don't derive the solution. You leap forward, grab something, say, what happens if I forget the fact that the square root of -1 is actually illegal? You say, well, we'll just call it imaginary number and we'll call it I. I wonder what happens. Machines won't do that. No AI would do that because it was trained all the times, and every rule you said to it was the square root of -1 is undefined. And so it would say, well, I can't go there. It's undefined. And the human being said, well, let's try it anyway.
Well, let's define it a different way.
Right. Let's move forward.
We'll move forward and see what happens.
But what McGilchrist says, and this is where I want to go into finally his quote, is that the part of your brain, and he's I believe a neurological, I forget what he is, but he's a neurologist or a neurological psychologist. I mean, he has a very deep understanding of the structures of the brain. So in general, the left side of your brain, the left brain, is the part of the brain that reduces things, that takes things apart, that tries to figure stuff out by breaking it and then putting it back together. And it's rules-based. If you give the left side of the brain, and it'll tell you, no, the square root of -1 does not work. So we just have to move on and try something else that we've been trained in. The right side of the brain is the Gestalt. It's the I see everything. I have the entire universe within me, and I see relationships, I see intuition, I see inspiration. And with those tools, I'm unafraid to leap forward into the unknown. I don't have the other tools. I don't have the analytical tools. I don't have the training tools, but I have the ability to leap forward. With those two pieces, McGilchrist is saying is that you're seeing the shadow of consciousness, which can be analytical, or it can be inspired, it can be intuitive, or it can be dogmatic and rigorous. but it can be both things. And it also, therefore, it's beyond both things. It encompasses all the rigor of the left side and all the intuitive and inspiration and relation to the unknown and to that which lies beyond of the right side. But yet it all, in fact, is part of, not entirely the being. The being is outside of it all. And neither side of the brain, the transducer, as he calls it, and as Penrose calls it, neither side of the brain has the full consciousness. And both sides of the brain are required to even to be encompassed by consciousness. So this is McGilchrist, and he gets us right to the edge of what we know and takes us beyond. And that's where you start to see spirit, and that's where you start to see inspiration. You start to see the leaps of faith and into the unknown that human beings have been doing since we were human beings.
Well, people have a tendency to want to define themselves as one or the other. In other words, this is the only logic is the only way to live in the world, or it's got to be all-encompassing and
all emotive.
Right. And nothing wrong in choosing whichever way works for you, but it's understanding that you are both, and to deny any part of that is denying yourself the fullness of who you actually are. And that wholeness expands your initial field of interaction into a much broader world. You have to understand that your world can expand. It's not that you set up your fence posts and this is the only thing that you're going to be living in. So many times people do that because, well, this is who I am, and this, and we can't go past these borders. It's like that's defining that particular space that you happen to be in, but taking steps out from that allows you or teaches you that you're more than the skill set you've developed in this particular space, this box.
Exactly. And skill sets like that, and skill sets of analysis, and the skill sets of mechanical relationships, physical and relationships, spatial relationships, the rule-based ways of relating to the world are very much the provenance of the left brain.
Well, that's the processing in a very specific way, whereas the right brain processes things from a completely different perspective. And that's rather broad, actually, because it encompasses emotions and how they feed into the pathways you've already set up. And the appreciation, now here's the thought, the appreciation of beauty. Some people would argue that is strictly a right brain thing. And I'm like, no. Because there is a lot of beauty on the left brain side, the processes. There's an elegance there when you begin to follow through that pathway. So to curtail the idea that beauty only comes from living in one side of the brain is also creating that field of interaction and it being a small space.
Well, you can't restrict beauty. And I would say things like that, things like beauty, are not they're not contained within thoughts alone. They're not contained within the inspiration or the Gestalt of the right brain alone. In fact, beauty starts to move up into a duality of those two things. You're involving both sides of the brain. Music, for argument's sake, McGilchrist goes on quite a bit about music. He says, thinking comes before language, and language is just sort of formalized thinking or concentrated thinking that we try to express a thought using this sort of poor vehicle of language. But when you talk about music, or you talk about art, or you talk about beauty, it transcends emotion, it transcends thought, and it is in itself a communication which has so many levels, far beyond the clumsiness of language, far beyond the sort of the tearing into shreds and tearing into pieces, the reductive analysis of thought. And when you see a group of people basically uplifted and brought into this sort of brought into tune or brought into synchrony with one piece of music, with one inspiring sweep of a vista, let's say, looking out over the ocean or looking into the depths of the night. When you see that, they're in sync and in tune with nothing to do with thought. And I think Tolle would say the same. Tolle would say that thinking gets in the way of the appreciation of beauty, of the appreciation of the moment of now, which is inestimably beautiful. The moment of now encompasses the incredible beauty and joy of existence, of being, and thought intrudes there. Thought is nothing more than a poor man's substitute for the moment of now, for the beauty of the moment of now.
Well, it's a process. You can use any process to become lost out of the present moment. You can be in so many different places through these processes. It's being aware enough to know what you are actually doing to yourself or doing with yourself. Are you confusing yourself? Are you throwing obstacles in your own way so that you can trip?
Isn't that interesting in that regard? The fact that we can abstract ourselves into multiple selves and then have an argument amongst those selves and get in our own way. That phrase of getting in your own way or having a conversation with yourself. And the fact that you can even abstract that, if you think about it, if you just realize for a second that the fact that you can abstract yourself into multiple selves and have a full conversation within your own being.
You're going to have a full-blown argument.
A full-blown argument means that the being itself must be greater than. If the being was any one of those voices,
Right.
then it couldn't encompass another voice, because the whole person is one voice. Well, if you put two voices, then you have suddenly your two beings. How is that possible? No, the being encompasses all the arguments within it, all the universe within it. And then again with OPH, my appreciation of my universe and all the beings I have in my head, I can try to express that and try to make it agree with your unique and fully consistent and as valid universe, but we have to make it agree with the objective reality, which neither one of us has a full representation of. The objective reality is our universe within us is a reflection of that objective reality within us, perfectly unique, because we're a consciousness which encompasses and is experiencing objective reality together. But the whole idea of consciousness is that it is what casts the shadow into the objective reality that allows us to even share it. Without consciousness, without the observer, there's arguably no experience of objective reality whatsoever.
Yes, interesting. It's kind of like when you realize that you take the solar system and the sun is at its center, but it throws out all this energy, this light.
Mm.
And if it did not illuminate the planets around it, the space around it, what would there be? Substances might be there, but there would be no life.
Mm.
So understanding that your consciousness is shedding light on a variety of things around it, and depending upon the situations, it shifts and changes moment by moment.
Mm. I think McGilchrist refers to that as sort of the spotlight of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
We should bring in the quote because he alludes to that a little bit. He calls that attention, and to him, attention is very important. Do you have the quote in front of you?
Yes.
Let's go for that.
All right. It might then be that the division of the human brain is also the result of the need to bring to bear two incompatible types of attention on the world at the same time. One narrow, focused, and directed by our needs, and the other broad, open, and directed toward whatever else is going on in the world apart from ourselves.
Mm.
Ian McGilchrist.
And what he means, of course, is the division of the physical brain into the left and right hemispheres.
Yeah, in essence, what he's describing is the left brain first, which is it narrows, focuses, and is pretty much directed by what the demands are, your needs. The other side, which is your right brain, is much more open and takes into account what else is going on besides what your particular focus is. What I find interesting is that this is also a description of the yin and the yang,
Mm-hmm.
where the male energy is always focused down, and it's the brightness, it's the light. And then the other side is, they call it the darkness, but it's much more, it's not straight and narrow, it's all encompassing. So it's understanding that these two are absolutely necessary for your being state to actually occur. And again, the Tao, that yin and yang symbol, the two fish going round, it seems, but is constantly moving, and it can't be portrayed on a two-dimensional sheet of paper.
Mm.
But to understand that the energy is constantly moving, and when you realize it's describing process, it encompasses, each one encompasses the other, because the eye of that fish is the opposite color.
Mm-hmm.
So it means that you keep the other in mind when you're interacting in these relationships.
Well, I mean, just as, to relate it back for a moment to OPH, for argument's sake, because the two consciousnesses there, or the two parts of the Tao, if you will, could be also the observer and the observed. They could also be two observers that hold each other in mind. They could be the relationship of two. That duality of observer, and then the observer casting the shadow of itself into reality. In essence, that matter is derived from consciousness, not the other way around, if you will.
It's understanding that they're in a relationship like this, in all things. You have one that emits, it ejects. It goes forth, but it has to be received by the other end.
Mm.
Always. Otherwise, neither one exists.
And then what McGilchrist talks about a little bit further on in his quote is types of attention. Now, he only alludes to it here, but what he means by attention, what he basically is meaning by attention, is that consciousness is attentive to, and Tolle would say aware of, the moment of now. That you direct your awareness, and we have, he says, two different incompatible, but I would say just two different necessary forms of attention. You have the necessity to be able to have the attention to details, the attention to components, the attention to needs and satisfaction of those needs, and the attention of the ability to construct and to deconstruct and to infer and to see cause and effect. These are incredibly important forms of attention, or class of attention, which encompasses all these various forms. But with just that, you would have this clockwork, mechanistic universe, and you wouldn't have a true consciousness. You'd have, in essence, the AI. And AI is truly focused and detailed and a reflection of really thought. When they call them large language models, language is no more than constructed from thoughts. And so words, individual words, which have maybe more than one meaning, but have at least one meaning, words are sort of a concentrated form of thought. And they may or may not properly convey the thought, but that's their whole intent. Without the only reason to have a word is that you try to shove a thought into it and send it out into the world so somebody else can pick it up, like a note in a bottle. So large language models are just a whole bunch, a vast amount of thoughts, a vast amount of words, and all the relationships between the words. They're incredibly reductive. They're incredibly constructive. They literally take every tiny bit, every little shred. Interestingly enough, Ma, when you said they're programmed, what they do with all that training data is they don't even start with words. They just start with the actual shapes of the letters, and from that, from the very ground up, from first principles, that this particular shape next to this particular shape starts to acquire meaning through relationship, through cause and effect. They're literally reduction machines and construction machines.
Well,
They are thought constructs.
That's interesting, because that's exactly what we do to teach the children words.
You show them a shape.
You start with your shapes first.
Right.
And your numbers.
Yes.
And what means what. Which is very interesting, because I'm thinking in terms of, this is the foundation of what we're talking about is an English language. And language itself has an internal structure.
Yep, a syntax.
Mm-hmm. And that affects the way people interact with things.
Mm-hmm.
Having a language structure that doesn't take I as an individual. There are some cultures that take it as
Collective.
a collection. Yes, it's a collective grouping as opposed to a single individual, and their societies are very different from the ones in the Western world. It's fascinating, really.
So you would say that LLMs, these large language models, these things that Dawkins says have consciousness, what McGilchrist would say is that they have a form of attention which would be more closely related to one half, the thinking brain, the word brain, that is within the consciousness of a human being.
See, what I'm seeing there is Dawkins has not separated the ability to see the two types.
Mm-mm. Not at all.
He's rolled them together and said, "Well, this is the whole thing. This is what it is." It's like, no, it's much more complex than that. And his programming, internal programming, is that if these words are said, therefore I can assume that this that is speaking to me actually has consciousness.
Okay.
He's made that generalized leap, not realizing that what you're doing is you're interacting with the surface of the box. You haven't opened the box and found the emptiness inside.
He's right. That's a very good point. That the emptiness inside the box is important also. But the whole idea of language is it's reductive.
Mm-hmm.
You say a letter next to another letter next to another letter, which makes a sound. Which is a sound next to a sound next to a sound encompasses a meaning, and then a meaning next to a meaning in syntax and in context gets you to at least a beginning of a thought.
Well, I do remember being focused, being taught that languages, you are supposed to use your language efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
But the purpose of it is to understand what is trying to be communicated through the language.
Yeah, and
Go to the thought or the concept or the emotion that's actually being communicated, and understanding that these words are vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And many times a word means something completely different to the person that you're talking with.
Definitions are important.
But you have to be trained. You have to train your brain to be able to interact on a broad base like that.
Mm-hmm.
That there is a body of knowledge that's trying to be communicated to you by this person. Are you capable of encompassing that?
Mm.
Do you want to? Or are you always falling back to how I feel as I'm hearing these words? It's very interesting because it shifts your mindset from how I'm reacting to what's being said to, well, what's the actual communication? What is it that's happening here?
I mean, there's a fascinating topic we could go into there, which is, the syntax of languages. But I believe we've actually exhausted our hour.
Ah, yes. Yeah, I think you are correct.
And McGilchrist did carry us through, however.
Yes, he did.
Okay.
So
in any case, you go ahead.
I'm Margaret.
And I'm Michael.
Thank you for listening.